Hey, everybody. Welcome to the WGU Alumni Podcast. We're thrilled to have you tuning in yet again. My name is Jeff Burton. I'm the Senior Manager of Alumni Engagement here at WGU. We have a great guest who is no exception to the idea of someone who seized his future and his opportunity, went back to school, and is doing really, really amazing things. And that is Maryland native Kristian Sevison. Kris, it's so good to see you again, and so glad to have you on the podcast.
Great to see you again, Jeff. It's been 10 years, but good to see you, my friend.
Thank you. You as well. Now, for reference, I was brand new at WGU in 2014, 2015, I think it was. And I had the privilege of working on our public relations team. And I met you when I flew to Baltimore and came to your house in Maryland. ABC News wanted to do a story about a student who was having a test or an assessment proctored. And so anyway, that's where we met. What do you remember about that? You're famous, Kris, ABC News. What do you remember about that?
Not so sure about the famous part, but I remember just, it was weird having a camera crew, in the house, folks, and the interview was fine, but just the chatting and having to kind of go through and look at my office setup and show the proctoring, how that all worked. And it was kind of neat. I think at the time it was rather innovative what you were doing from the proctoring standpoint. And I think that's what caught the attention of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were great. I remember, so I came to you in Baltimore. I think our proctor company was down in Alabama, I want to say, somewhere down south. So my boss, Joan, actually traveled down to Alabama to be with the crew down there. And I still remember this because our students will appreciate this, right? When you take a proctored assessment, it's very secure, right? Like there is nobody in the room with you. You cannot have notes. You cannot have any of that. And so they proctored it just like they would any student. And I remember that the proctor was like, okay, like you've got a camera crew, like what is going on? And obviously we prepped them, but that was kind of funny because they were like, this isn't going to fly. They need to leave the room.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, I was like, one time I was taking an exam and my son opened the door during the test and paused everything out. And I was thinking, how are we getting beyond this interview? And I have a whole camera crew. So I was thinking the same thing from the opposite side.
Yeah. Kind of a great experience, but we're appreciative of your time, and it's so good to catch up with you. So Kristian, I want to dive into your experience a little bit and talk about your journey. So I'm curious, what was your motivation for going back to school in the first place? Why did you enroll in WGU?
Well, it was one of those things. I'd always wanted to have a degree. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. None of the siblings have degrees. The very blue collar family. And I decided I wanted to try and eventually go to college. My initial goal was to be a lawyer or an attorney outside of high school, and didn't happen right away, and went into the military instead. Got out of there and started working a job. So, it just, life got in the way, and then you start getting married and having kids, and it takes away. But I never lost that desire to have my degree. And it really came to me when I was in a position at one of my companies I worked at, to where the position I was in preferred master's, bachelor's required. And I had been in a position for 3 years with no degree. And I was, a new ownership was coming in, and I was a little bit worried, I think now's the time to do it. I've been putting it off. And, I always say life's too busy, but I think when I started school, I realized that no, life's as busy as you make it, and you can find the time.
How would you say that this decision was connected to a bigger dream that you had for your life?
I wanted my parents to have a college graduate, for one. They'd always, they couldn't afford to put us through school, and, and they were very upset about that. Now, I wanted them to see that themselves, who could do it. That was a driver for me. And, when I was at WGU, my mom was sick, doing things. And then later on, my dad ended up getting cancer. So I wanted to complete my degrees and just be a part of fulfilling the dream that I had for them. But also, I think it's more just that I had to prove that I could do it. I had to prove that, everybody goes through life saying, I wish I would have. And I didn't want to have that I wish I would have at the end. I wanted to complete it. And I've always thought about it, always wanted it. And here I was going back to school at 38 years old to get a degree, and it was like, wow, it's interesting to go back, that age. But I think it really lent a lot to go back at that age. I think my life experience really helped me in school.
Was there anything holding you back from going back to school?
Myself. I think it was, you get out of school that long, you're out of school longer than you were in school, and you think you're going to go back and do I really know anything anymore? Can I really pass these classes? I don't remember about English. Am I doing the commas in the right place? All those things, like just my own questioning of myself and my abilities. Not that I didn't think I couldn't do it, just what would I have to relearn and how long would it take to get through? And is the juice worth the squeeze from that perspective with, growing a family and growing a life?
No, that is very true. Would you say that there was an unexpected surprise or bonus from going back to school?
Absolutely. Within the first two or three classes and the WGU methodology, I realized that I could get through classes. I knew a lot more than I gave myself credit for, if that makes sense. And I think that it also gave me the ability to um, tap into my own knowledge. When I got to the upper level classes and really the business based things that I did daily and understood daily, I was able to go through classes much quicker. The model you offer, the all you can consume, those pieces, that was beneficial for me. And I was able to take advantage of that.
That's great. Yeah, the competency-based education model that the WGU introduced is probably becoming a little bit more commonplace, and others are kind of trying to copy that. But so glad that you were able to benefit personally from, being 38. I think you said going back to school. You knew a lot of those things, and you embraced it.
I think the thing that stood out to me the most, Jeff, is that and I tell everybody this. It was the chance that how else could you ever? I completed 21 credits, 7 classes in 7 days when I got to my upper level to where I understood the concepts. It took me a lot longer for the humanities and the sciences and things I hadn't done in years. When I got to my wheelhouse, that's where it really showed competency really means something, because it took what I do in the working world and allowed me the opportunity to translate it to school. And I showed that I knew it already, even not having to learn it, and apply it from the real world into school versus applying from school into the real world. Right. It was just the opposite. It was kind of cool to see that.
A grueling week, I would imagine.
Yeah, I did. There was not much sleep. It was not, it was, I took a vacation week. I said, I didn't want to do another semester. I wanted to kind of get it all done and get things through. And, and I knew that if I could just get through those classes, that I would have one more to focus on and get done in time for the semester.
Now, Kris, can you think of another time in your life when you decided it wasn't too late? Maybe a hobby or a bucket list item, something like that?
Yeah. So, I had always, my dad was a mechanic growing up, for the most part. And we always wanted to restore a car together. And we talked about it. And, I think I mentioned earlier, my dad ended up getting cancer. And when he got diagnosed, and like, time is short. And so I went out and I got a 69 Camaro, and, and we got something, it was almost fully restored when we got it, but there's a few things we had to do. But the chance to just sit side by side with my dad and something he always wanted to do and run it around, it was great. So it just never too late to do it. Even we talked about it for years, and, even though my dad had cancer, it wasn't too late. We had it for 2 years with that and 2 years with that car. So it was awesome.
Oh, that's great. Now, do you mind if I ask you a little bit about your military service? You mentioned in your journey, I think you did military right out of high school, and kind of life got in the way. Tell us a little bit about the military service and maybe how that prepared you for life and also for enrolling at WGU.
Well, I tell you that the biggest thing I think that you learn in the military is pay attention to detail and do it right the first time. Right? It's I think the cliche is measure twice, cut once, and I think it's just instilled. It's really, and I think that's one. It's even a life hack, that I talk about, is just listening is key to everything that you do. That's the most success you can have, is through listening, because you find out more from others by hearing what they're saying versus preparing your response. So I would just say that it's just paying attention to detail became very second nature, and it wasn't as an 18-year-old kid. I can tell you that. But by the time you get through that and you end of boot camp, you know how to pay attention to detail and not forget anything.
Absolutely. You bring up life hacks, and I'd like to ask you if you have an additional one or two that you'd like to share. It's fun for me to be in this seat and to interview people in all different walks of life and all different disciplines in study. And it's always fun to just hear what advice or what professional guidance, life hack did you receive that helped you? So in addition to the one that you just shared, do you have any additional ones that might be worth sharing?
Yeah. I think I mentioned earlier that, I was afraid to go back to school as an older adult, right? Just what would I remember, just doubting myself. And I think that when I told my dad I was going to go back to school, his thing was, why didn't you do it already? I'm like, well, am I going to be smart enough? I'm going to be, I was questioning myself. And the first thing he said was, you know, um, fear is internal. Nobody else has your fear. Your fear is your own, and you can overcome your own fear. So it's all up here. Just don't put too much thought into it. Just go and do, and you'll see if the fear is real or not. If your feeling of fear is real or not. So it's just that. Just don't give in to fear, right? I mean, that's what holds us all back. We question ourselves. We don't give ourselves the ability to develop and grow officially because we put parameters or we look myopically at things. And and that's not, when you expand out from that and realize that I am more than just what I think I am, life's limitless at that point. What you can accomplish in successes.
That's great. Great insight. Great information that you're sharing. I'm curious, over the next, say, 1 to 2 years, for you professionally, what are the things that you're working on over the next couple of years?
I'd like to do something where I can help others. I got 20 years of sales experience, and being a part of it in software world. And it just really, and I've learned a lot from people. And I think just helping, I'd like to get to an area to where I can help younger folks coming up in the sales realm and help them achieve and not be afraid of that cold call, not be afraid of the prospect, and not be afraid of the things that you got to do to be successful. So just really kind of be more mentor-like versus just a person doing it.
We have, as you know, graduates living across the country in all 50 states. And I wanted you to brag a little bit about your hometown in Maryland, there in the Baltimore area. What is the best thing about living in Maryland that you can share with our audience?
Well, outside of getting the seasons, and we have different weather types, I think the best thing is, I am an hour and a half from multiple major cities: Philadelphia, DC, Baltimore. We're all in proximity. I'm 3 hours from the beach. I live in the mountains. I mean, it's just, I have it all. So I really like this spot of the country where we are. And although we got snow on the ground now, it's a great place to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Where is your favorite U.S. History site that you like to visit?
Well, I'm only 15, 20 minutes from Gettysburg. So I do a bunch of things around Gettysburg, and I'm only less than an hour from Antietam. So Antietam battlefields and Gettysburg battlefields, I kind of go through and kind of, I'm kind of a history buff, a little bit of a geek too. I'll take my little books and find out where this picture was and place myself there and look at it and just see things and put myself back in the day, I guess.
That's really, really cool. Well, I'm excited for you to showcase the great work that you've done post graduating from WGU. And so what is the most exciting thing that you're working on right now?
Well, I know it's kind of weird saying this about me, but I'm excited because my son's about to graduate. So I went to college later, and and didn't really do the as I didn't do the traditional go to brick and mortar. I didn't have that experience. I went into the military instead. So just kind of living a little bit vicariously through him, but just helping him get through these final stages, if you will. He's kind of getting nervous about graduating. I got some connections in the industry. So I have, he's got an internship coming up and hopefully a position, those kind of things. So it's just really kind of getting him prepared for his next phase of life.
I love that about you. That says what a good dad you are, that the greatest thing that you're working on is helping your son launch his career and be successful. That's really cool.
Thanks. I think it's, although I don't want to take all the credit, I think it's more, maybe kind of, maybe get off dad's coattails finally. I've been paying for his school, so it's good to not have to do that later. Save some money monthly, I guess. Maybe I can retire at some point. Just kidding.
Yeah, some point. It's coming. Do you have any fun trips or travels that you're taking on here in the next little while?
Well, we do. We have a trip coming. It's not really related to history, but for the holidays, for Christmas, my wife, I'm into bourbons. And so she got me a weekend trip for Bourbon Con in Lexington, Kentucky.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So just, get to go experience a bunch of bourbons all at once, for the weekend. And, but it's just things like that. But again, while I'm in Kentucky, there's a whole lot of places on the way to stop and look at things of stuff that happens. So I'm sure she's not as much as into it as I am. So I can't do too much, but, I'll get away with what I can,
What a great gift. You will do that together then?
Absolutely. Yeah. She's going with me. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're going to experience together. She won't drink bourbon, but she'll help me experience and let me buy some, hopefully.
That's fun. You'll have to keep us posted on how that goes.
I will.
That's great. Well, Kristian, it has been so great to catch up with you. You're doing great work. You're a great representative of the university. And whether it's ABC News, whether it's this podcast, or everything in between, I know you and I have conversations, and you've referred people, or you've shared your experience at WGU, and again, you joined WGU in a period where we were a little bit less known than we are today. Certainly, people are learning about it for the first time, but just want to say thank you for being an ambassador that you are. And what do you miss most about being a student at WGU? Again, it's been over 10 years, but what do you miss most about that experience?
I think that one of the things that's great about WGU is that when you do that final practicum number exam or thing, immediately if you passed or what's going on. So it kind of sets it at ease. There's not a professor later on to grade. Some projects you have like that, but most things it's instantaneous. And folks today like instantaneous response, right? So to know right away that, the class is done and I did okay and can just move on and put it behind me, that sense of accomplishment that occurred so quickly is awesome. And you don't get that too often in on a regular basis, right? This huge sense of accomplishment. Wow, just this week of studying is just now gone. It's finished. But I think it's that lack of no time and then, wow, I did it.
Any future plans in education, or you feel like taking those business degrees and just cranking out in sales and the management, the world that you live is good enough for you?
Well, ironically, I've been looking more and more into where I could be like adjunct professor or something, around, sales and marketing and things like that. So I think that goes along with that mentoring and helping others. I think that's kind of something I'd look to do in as well. So I think that's kind of maybe a goal that I'd like to accomplish at some point.
I like that. That's great. How about podcasting? Is podcasting in your future?
Not quite so sure. I don't know that I'm, I don't know how camera ready I'm always going to be. But obviously in sales, I have no problem talking. I love to talk. So I guess I won't count that out.
Yeah. Well, you're a great guest. This has been a great interview. And I think that our audience is going to really enjoy listening to the things that you've shared. And as we conclude the interview, I'd love to give you the final words. So maybe consider this your audition, right, into the podcast space or into the adjunct professor world. But what sorts of advice or wisdom would you want to share, or any final thoughts as we wrap?
The thought is, if you're thinking about going back to school, regardless of age, do it. The sense of accomplishment that I felt finally getting my degree after 20 years after I should have started college, right? It was a great feeling, and it led to my future going on and getting a master's, and then even now, like you said, wanting to go into some sort of maybe professorship or helping others in school with things. So it all started with WGU going back. And, so I don't know that I want to go get a doctorate anytime soon, but I do want to, I recommend anyone to just grasp life and go back to school if you haven't. And WGU is a great place just because of the fact of, from a person who worked for 20 years before going back to school, the knowledge was great that I learned in life, and that competency translates directly. And you get to show it, not just, you get to do it in an exam, and you can see how much knowledge you really do have. And I think it enlightens yourself that, you give yourself less credit than what you should, I think, in most cases. And that brings you to the forefront. You realize how much you do know, in life, what's life taught you so far.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Continued success to you, my friend, and definitely keep in touch. We'd love to hear about all the good that you continue to do. So thank you, Kristian, for all the time today.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, thank you.